A wounded werewolf appeared in her yard. She helped him, never knowing he was the Alpha King true life story. The rain had not stopped for 3 days when Elena Marsh heard the sound behind her house. It was late, almost midnight, and the wind was throwing sheets of water against her windows. She had just made tea and was about to go to bed when a heavy thud came from the back fence. Not the soft sound of a branch falling, something bigger, something alive. Elena stood still, the mug warm in her hands, listening. For a moment, she told herself it was nothing, maybe a deer that had wandered too close, or a raccoon knocking over the bins. But then she heard it again, a low sound, almost like a groan, and she knew it wasn't her imagination. She lived alone on the edge of town, where the houses thinned out and the forest began. Most people thought she was strange for choosing a place like this, so close to the trees, so far from neighbors. But Elena liked the quiet. She worked at the local veterinary clinic, and after a long relationship had ended the year before, the silence of the woods felt safer than the noise of people. Still, the sound outside was not silence. It pulled at something in her, the same instinct that made her good at her job. She set down her tea, grabbed a flashlight and an old raincoat, and stepped out into the storm. The yard was dark, lit only by the thin beam of her flashlight and the occasional flash of lightning. She walked toward the fence, her boots sinking into the mud, her heart beating faster with every step. When the light finally found the shape lying near the fence post, she froze. It was a wolf, but not like any wolf she had ever seen in photographs or textbooks. It was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with thick gray fur soaked dark by the rain. Its side was torn open, a long wound that ran from its ribs toward its back leg, and blood mixed with rainwater pooled beneath it. Elena's first instinct was fear. Every part of her brain told her to back away, to call someone, to do anything except walk closer to a wild animal that could kill her with one bite. But the wolf wasn't moving. Its breathing was shallow, and when it lifted its head slightly to look at her, its eyes were not full of danger. They were full of pain. She had seen that look before, in dogs and cats brought into the clinic after accidents. It was the look of a creature too hurt to be a threat. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Okay, just breathe." She didn't know what she was doing, didn't know if it was foolish or brave, but she found herself kneeling a few feet away, speaking in the same calm voice she used at work. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." The wolf watched her, its golden eyes never leaving her face. It made a low sound, not quite a growl, but something close to it, a warning. Elena stayed still, waiting. After a long moment, the sound faded, and the wolf's head dropped back to the ground, as if it had decided she wasn't a danger. It took nearly 20 minutes for Elena to get the wolf into her old garden shed, using a tarp to drag it slowly across the muddy yard, while it weakly tried to help by pushing with its good legs. By the time she had it inside, both of them were soaked and exhausted. She worked through the night, the way she would for any injured animal at the clinic, cleaning the wound as gently as she could, applying pressure to stop the bleeding, wrapping it with bandages from her own first aid kit. The wolf trembled under her hands but didn't fight her, didn't snap or growl again. It simply watched her, those gold eyes following her every movement, as if it understood exactly what she was trying to do. "You're lucky," she told it quietly, more to fill the silence than anything else. "Another hour out there, and you wouldn't have made it." The wolf blinked slowly, almost like a nod. By morning, the storm had passed, and pale light came through the cracks in the shed's wooden walls. Elena, stiff from sitting on the cold floor all night, found the wolf still alive, its breathing steadier than before. She should have called animal control. She should have reported a wild predator on her property. But something stopped her, some quiet certainty that this wasn't an ordinary wolf, and that handing it over to strangers would somehow be wrong. Instead, she brought it water and small pieces of meat from her fridge, and she gave it a name without really meaning to. "Ash," she said, looking at the gray of its fur. "I'll call you Ash." What Elena didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the creature in her shed was not simply a wolf. He was Kieran, ruler of a hidden kingdom that existed just beyond the edge of the human world, in the deep parts of the forest, where ordinary people never wandered. To his own kind, he was known as the Alpha King, the strongest and most respected leader his people had seen in generations. 2 nights before the storm, Kieran had been patrolling the border of his territory, when he was ambushed by a group of assassins sent from a rival pack, enemies who had long wanted his throne for themselves. He had fought them off, but not before one of them struck him with a blade coated in something unnatural, a poison mixed with dark magic, meant to trap him in his wolf form and keep him from healing properly. Weakened and unable to shift back to his human shape, he had run for hours through the forest, trying to escape his attackers, until exhaustion and blood loss finally brought him down at the edge of a stranger's yard. He hadn't expected kindness. He had expected to die alone in the rain, or to be found by humans who would fear him and do far worse than leave him be. Instead, he had found a woman with steady hands and a calm voice, who knelt beside a monster without knowing it was one, and chose to help anyway. Over the days that followed, Kieran stayed in the shed, slowly healing under Elena's care. He could have left once he regained enough strength to walk, could have dragged himself back toward the forest and his own people, but something kept him there. Maybe it was the curse still working through his blood, slowing his recovery. Maybe it was something else entirely. Elena visited him every morning before work, and every evening after, sitting with him in the quiet of the shed, talking about her day as if he could understand every word. In a strange way, he could. His mind remained fully his own even while trapped in this form, and he listened to her stories about the clinic, about difficult patients and worried pet owners, about the loneliness that had settled into her life since her last relationship ended. "You're a good listener," she told him one evening, scratching gently behind his ears as he rested his head in her lap. Better than most people, honestly. If he could have laughed, he would have. Instead, he simply leaned into her hand, feeling something in his chest loosen that had been tight for a very long time. As a king, he was surrounded by advisors, guards, and subjects who needed him to be strong, to be certain, to never show weakness. Here, in this small wooden shed, he was simply Ash, a wounded creature being cared for by someone who asked nothing of him in return. As the days passed, the curse began to weaken, just as Elena began to notice strange things she couldn't quite explain. Some nights, when she came to check on him, she would catch what looked like a shadow shifting in the corner of the shed, almost like the outline of a man, gone the moment she blinked. She told herself it was tiredness, the trick of dim light and an overactive imagination. She didn't let herself consider any other explanation, because the other explanation made no sense at all. What she didn't know was that Kieran's absence had thrown his entire kingdom into uncertainty. His people did not know if their king was alive or dead. His most trusted advisors searched everywhere, sending trackers deep into unfamiliar territory, even into the edges of the human world, following faint traces of his scent through the rain-washed forest. Rival packs, sensing the chance created by his disappearance, grew bolder, testing the borders of his land, whispering among themselves that perhaps the Alpha King was gone for good. None of this reached Elena, not directly. But one evening, nearly 2 weeks after she had first found him, she noticed something different about her yard. The air felt heavier somehow, charged with a tension she couldn't name. When she stepped outside to check on Ash, she found him standing instead of lying down, fully healed now, his massive form alert and tense, staring toward the tree line. "What is it?" she asked, suddenly nervous. He didn't answer, of course, only let out a low growl directed at the darkness beyond her fence. Then she saw them, 3 figures emerging from the trees, moving with an unnatural quickness that made her stomach drop. They weren't ordinary people. Something about the way they moved, the way their eyes seemed to catch the light, told her instinctively that danger had finally found her quiet little yard. What happened next blurred together in Elena's memory, fast and frightening and impossible to fully explain. The wolf she had cared for, the gentle creature she had named Ash, placed himself between her and the strangers, his entire body changing in front of her, fur receding, limbs lengthening, until where a wolf had stood, a man now stood instead, tall and strong despite the faint scars still visible on his side. Elena's mind struggled to catch up with what her eyes were showing her, but there was no time to process it fully. The strangers attacked, and Kieran fought back with a strength and speed that left her breathless, his movements precise, even though he was clearly still recovering. Elena, terrified, but unwilling to simply stand by, grabbed the nearest thing she could find, an old metal rake leaning against the shed, and used it to drive back one of the attackers who got too close. It was over almost as quickly as it began. The 3 assassins, realizing they were outmatched, and that reinforcements were arriving fast through the trees, retreated back into the forest, disappearing as suddenly as they had come. Kieran turned to her then, breathing hard, his human eyes the same gold as the wolf's had been. "You're not hurt?" he asked, his voice rough but gentle, the first words she had ever heard him speak. Elena stared at him, the rake still gripped tightly in her hands, her mind spinning with everything she had just witnessed. "Who are you?" she finally managed to ask. "My name is Kieran," he said simply, "and I owe you my life." He explained everything then, as more of his people arrived at the edge of her property, golden-eyed and respectful, waiting at a distance for their king. He told her about his kingdom hidden in the forest, about the ambush, the curse, and the weeks he had spent healing in her shed, while pretending, in his silence, to be nothing more than an ordinary wolf. Elena listened to all of it, and somehow, despite how impossible it sounded, she believed him completely. Perhaps it was the gentleness still present in his human eyes, the same gentleness she had seen every evening when he rested his head in her lap. Perhaps it was simply that she had already given her trust to him weeks ago, without knowing his name or his title, and that trust hadn't been wrong. "You could have told me," she said quietly, "at any point." "I didn't know how," Kieran admitted, "and I wasn't sure you'd believe me. I also wasn't sure I wanted this to end the moment you knew the truth." His people waited patiently as he stood there, clearly torn between the responsibilities calling him home and the woman in front of him, who had asked for nothing in return for saving his life. Finally, he stepped closer, careful, the way he had been every single night in that small wooden shed. "My kingdom needs me," he said, "but I don't want to disappear from your life the way I appeared in your yard. Will you let me come back? Not as Ash, as myself, this time." Elena looked at him for a long moment, the rake finally lowering from her hands, the adrenaline slowly fading into something quieter and steadier. She thought about the weeks of quiet evenings, the comfort she hadn't realized she needed, the strange peace she had found sitting beside a wounded creature who turned out to be so much more than she ever imagined. "Yes," she said finally. "Come back." Kieran returned to his kingdom that night, his people surrounding him, relief evident in every face as their king walked among them once more, alive and whole. But before he left, he turned back one last time toward the small house at the edge of the forest, toward the woman standing in her yard who had saved him without knowing his name. She had only wanted to help a wounded animal. She never imagined she would end up holding the heart of a king, and as the trees swallowed him from view, Elena understood that her quiet life at the edge of the woods had just become something far less ordinary than she ever expected.